Start recording. Welcome to the Halava Fantasy Football League. This is the weekly recap. We are doing week 13. So today's drink is just Safeway seltzer water. Your ears. It's just water with bubbles. Alright, so we are week 13. We have one more regular season. There's a lot more clarity with the playoff seedings. And there was a lot of drama this week determining who has a chance to make the playoffs and several of us ended up getting booted, unfortunately. But let's just go quickly through the recap. Me and Milo versus James. This one was a tough loss for me because I think it was a big stretch for me to be able to make the playoffs, but I thought I had a chance. The only thing is I got Deebo Samuel'd by James, so that one kind of hurt a lot. But for my team, I got pretty mediocre score from Jared Goff. I guess they didn't rely on him as much. I got a okay score from Amon-Ra St. Brown. Calvin Ridley was my last player who, if I was going to have any kind of chance, I needed to go off. Like, he needed to score like an additional 35 points, which I guess it's possible, but it's a real long shot. It just never came. Brees Hall was pretty bad. Expect more from him, but that team is just downhill. Jahmyr Gibbs was the product of a lot of the points going to the other players. Fortunately, a lot of them went to my players. In particular, Sam Laporta had the best tight end score of the week, 24.5. He had 9 catches, a touchdown, and 140 receiving yards. Best tight end of the week. And so he's kind of locked himself, I think, in that top 3 in terms of tight ends going forward. And so I think if somehow they can unlock him, he'll have a good future. Matt Prater was pretty decent, but not much. And I knocked it out of the park with the defense. I had to make a choice, and I chose wisely, and I got 18.5 for my defense. Fortunately, it's not enough. Off my bench, I had pretty decent games from Pickens and Pierce finally showing up, and nothing from the other guys. And Will Levis, pretty mediocre from him. James, however, maybe there's a chance that I'm in this game, but it was Deebo Samuel who had 2 touchdowns, 116 receiving yards, and a rushing touchdown, so 3 touchdowns. Tagovailoa, I'm pretty surprised by his scores, as crazy as like Tyreek Hill is going. Cooper Kupp is healthy, got a touchdown. They look good in their win, destroying the Browns. AJ Brown had a solid game, even though they lost. That was a big upset. Philly going down, San Francisco winning. So at least for Brad, who's fantasy irrelevant at this point in the season, can at least root his team. They look like Super Bowl contenders. Rashad White had a super good game, a rushing touchdown, 84 rushing yards. Zach Charbonnet is another one who, like, I don't know, we say he's bad, but he balled out this week, and it really helped him. And then the rest of the scores, Conklin, Myers, and the Denver D, not much, but is enough for him to lock his place in the playoffs, eliminating me. Off the bench, a really bad game from Herbert. That was a horrible game. The Chargers versus, that was a fantasy black hole. Chargers versus Patriots. Chargers got the win. A.J. Dillon had an okay game. Gibson, okay game. And JSN had an okay game. And Thomas still on IR. So congrats to James. You make the playoffs. So let's move on. Eric versus I'm going llama hunting. This is Mike trying to knock Eric out of the playoffs, but unfortunately he wasn't able to do so. Dak Prescott continues to look like the best quarterback in the league. Even though Brock Purdy is the MVP favorite right now, I think Prescott is doing more than what Brock Purdy, I think, has the benefit of a better team around him. McLaurin didn't give him anything. Rashee Rice is solid, and I think this is a key for Eric going forward. Is a key going forward because Mahomes has no weapons. Rashee Rice looks like it, and maybe hopefully they can use the remaining games to like get Rice to be that true clear cut number one. And if they get that chemistry going, then that'll help Eric a lot. Derrick Henry had a good game, a really good game. 2 rushing touchdowns, 102 rushing yards. That was kind of vintage Derrick Henry. Warren didn't do too much, but he was okay. Taysom Hill had a huge game. 1 rushing touchdown, 59 rushing yards, 15 receiving yards. Continues to be the ultimate flex player. Najee Harris was good. 63 rushing yards, 16 rushing attempts, 14 receiving yards. They lost the game, but at least they got him fantasy points. McManus, he missed a field goal, but he was able to get him close to 10 points. And then the Tampa Bay D was kind of average. For Mike, trying to knock him off, he had Russell Wilson do okay, but not that great for fantasy. Brandon Ayuk, solid. He got a touchdown. Nothing too much from Cooper and Stevenson. Kyron Williams is he is trending up, and I look for him to be like a top pick next year because he's been really balling as of late. Jordan, tight end, pretty solid game from a tight end, but Hill just he does more than tight end stuff. Singletary, not much. Nick Folk had a really good game, 10 points, and then again the defense on Mike's side was pretty average. Off the bench for both of these guys, Eric had a couple of bye weeks. Jones is still hurt, I guess. Higgins was okay. I mean, it was incredible to see their offense. It's just like Higgins seems to be odd man out for now. And then the Jets D that he picked up actually performed better than Tampa. For Mike's team, Brandon Cooks had a really good game for him. 1 receiving touchdown, 41 receiving yards. But Eric stays in the hunt. Mike gave him his best shot, but could not knock him out. And Darren versus Brad. So here's the other one where someone trying to play kind of spoiler. I think Darren was in a much better position, but at least help him with kind of like mess with the seedings a little bit. And Brad was successful in knocking him off. It's just, unfortunately, a score like this would have been nice for Brad earlier in the season. It's just too little too late. We just said Patrick Mahomes' weapons is pretty awful, and the score is kind of showing that. Another loss by Kansas City. They look kind of vulnerable in terms of their playoff hopes. Tyler Lockett had an okay game. Tutu Atwell had just 1 catch. McCaffrey is solid. Chuba Hubbard is amazing. He had an amazing game for Darren. And Ferguson balled out. Another great tight end score this week. And then the butt kick was decent, but not much from Kirk and the Dallas D. This really hurt Darren. Kirk got a big catch and did something, got injured with that catch and was done for the day. And then the Dallas D, this is a real anomaly. This is not normal, because if you look at Dallas's D, they've been dominant both in real life and in fantasy, but they ended up with the shootout with Seattle and ended up giving up all these points, giving Darren negative points. For Brad, he had a huge games from a lot of his healthy players. Brock Purdy, 4 passing touchdown, looks good. Garrett Wilson, pretty decent despite having terrible quarterback play. Nico Collins really balled out, and they need him now because no Tank Dell anymore. And then Bijan had an okay score. Devon A-Chain is back, and this is the kind of scores that he was getting when he first entered on the scene. So he looks like another future star. I think the concern with him is him being a smaller back. Injuries will definitely be a concern. Logan Thomas didn't do nothing. Zach Moss, pretty meh for a running back. A really good kicking game. And then the San Francisco D. This is kind of surprising in a way, because even though they gave up like 19 points, it was a dominant win. It just doesn't reflect in this score. Off the bench for these guys, Darren had Godwin, who had 8 points. That would have been better than Atwell this week. And then for Darren, he had Jerry Jeudy, not Darren. Brad had Jerry Jeudy getting 51 receiving yards and 3 receptions. in the loss to Houston. But Darren was still sitting pretty. He could stomach this loss, so he's still in the playoffs. And I think the most painful thing for Darren is losing Taylor. Like last week, he got hurt and was lost. So that's a big guy that's kind of hurting. Hopefully, if Hubbard can kind of like fill in that spot, then maybe it'll help. But losing Taylor really hurts. Let's skip that one. We'll save that one for last. Let's go to Brownsville Jets versus Gary. Here's another inconsequential game, as Mike has already got the playoff spot. I think he's just hanging on for number 1 seed. Gary could not knock him down. For Mike, this is kind of a down week for him a little bit. Hurts was good fantasy-wise in defeat. Devontae Smith continues to trend up, which bodes well for Mike. Sutton also has been solid in the resurgence of Denver turning their season around. Kareem Hunt, though, not too much. Sanders didn't do much. Freiermuth did, I guess that's average for a tight end. Josh Downs didn't do much. Aubrey kicked a bunch of points, and so this score is actually deceiving. 18 points from a kicker is pretty amazing, so this is probably a double-digit score for Mike otherwise. And the Jacksonville D giving up a lot of yardage and points to Cincinnati on Monday night. It was a heavy bye week for him. I think you're going to have Gus Edwards in the lineup. DJ Moore is also a nice option to have. Saquon Barkley, another RB1, and TJ Hawkinson. So this is a scheduled loss that he ended up winning anyway. And then he's got Kyler Murray as a backup. For Gary, kind of very sparse scores here. Tank Dell getting hurt and injured and knocked out. That's really painful because we were just praising him as being like he had surpassed Puka Nacua as wide receiver 1. But he got injured on this running play. And it was a big question mark like, well, why are you running him? And he's lost now for the season, which is really tragic. It's another issue with smaller players too. Tank Dell is not a big player, but they probably misused him in trying to have him run block. Sam Howell did an okay job. Jalen Waddle, he has been kind of the odd man out for Miami. Jacoby Ford had a solid day. Javonte Williams, pretty average. Travis Kelce had a good game, solid in defeat. Curtis Samuel had an okay game, not much from your kicker, just 3 extra points, and then a solid game from the defense, pitching a shutout and helping you to get nearly 20 points from your defense. We were talking about the option of Nacua versus Dell. If you play Nacua in place of Tank Dell, you're winning this game. But again, it doesn't do much in terms. I mean, what does that get you? That gets you to 6-7. So I guess you're on the outside chance of survival. So I think this is one of them. Yeah, so in the beginning I said this was inconsequential, but I take that back. I think Gary had a outside chance to make the playoffs with a win, but it didn't happen. And this is probably the kiss of death, playing Tank Dell over Nacua. Can't blame you though, because of maybe play them both. I don't know if that offsets. I think that does get you the win, but definitely it hurts. You don't expect Dell to get a 0. It's just tragic that he got hurt. Jacobs is on bye, Mattis is on bye, and you sneakily picked up Aaron Rodgers to see if you can see him miraculously come back from that Achilles injury faster than anybody else. But all for naught, as Gary is now eliminated from the playoffs. Morgan versus Aaron. So this game kind of mattered too. Aaron is another one who's like trying to stay in the playoffs. Technically, he can stomach the loss, but now it puts him he's on the outside end. He's on that bubble, that literal bubble, but on the wrong side of the bubble right now. Morgan had a huge game, and then I think if these kind of scores keep up for him, it'll bode well for a nice playoff run. Matthew Stafford, this is a sneaky good pickup for him, especially because as they look good now in the season with everybody kind of healthy. They blew out Cleveland, who is a good defense, And so this looked like the Super Bowl season Matthew Stafford. So that's probably a sneaky good pickup for him. Drake London, disappointing week. Christian Watson balled out. 2 touchdowns, 71 receiving yards in this shocker of knocking off Kansas City. But now it's starting to look like Green Bay is legit because they've knocked off 2 top teams now, both the Lions and Kansas City. So they're gonna kind of look scary down the stretch. The only thing is at the end of the game is they're trying to run the clock out. It looked like he hurt his hamstring. I see he's questionable, so hopefully it's not too serious going forward for Morgan. Otherwise, that's gonna be a painful loss. Travis Etienne had a decent game. It's actually really good. I think just hasn't been like the peaks that Morgan had earlier in the season. Kamara, though, really balled out in this slugfest against Detroit. It looked like they were going to get stomped on because Detroit had like a 21-0 lead on them. But then they slowly just fought their way back into the game, largely on the shoulders of Alvin Kamara and David Carr. But they just fell short. But it was perfect day for fantasy for Kamara. Njoku didn't do too much. Jamar Chase really balled out. I just said this last week, right? Like, oh, do you give up on your skill position shares in the Bengals because now you've lost Joe Burrow? I said, watch, Jamar Chase is going to turn around and have an amazing week. He has an amazing week. Largely it's because of that one pass that he caught and took for like 76 yards for a touchdown. But still, Chase is a premium wide receiver. That's the only conclusion you can draw. I mean, it's better that he has Burrow, but it doesn't matter. If you have Chase, you play him. Jake Elliott, solid kicking game, 8.5 points for you. And then the Houston D, actually pretty solid, getting you that 10.9. For Aaron, who had a really good game, it's just Morgan really blew up on the shoulders of the skill guys. Watson, Kamara, and Chase. For Aaron, not too much from CJ Stroud this week. Justin Fields was on bye, so there was no decision to be made. Mike Evans really balled out. 162 receiving yards. Chris Olave, another solid game. Also part of that comeback. Austin Eckler, though, is trending down. Didn't do anything much. I think he only had 14 rushing attempts and 18 yards. I mean, I guess the Patriots do have a good D, but this has been the trend ever since kind of blowing up against the Detroit game that we went to. Tony Pollard continues to ball out late in the season, so this also bodes well for Aaron and his attempt to continue to stay in the playoffs. George Kittle, a solid tight end game. Too bad he couldn't get it in the end zone, but he was a big key in that dominant display against Philly. And then Michael Pittman Jr., baller, 105 receiving yards and a touchdown. Over 10 catches, 11 actually. Jake Moody okay with the kicking game, and then the Pittsburgh D didn't do much. Out the bench, nothing much for either side. Kenneth Walker, I don't know when he's going to be back for Morgan, but I guess he says he might be able to play week 14, so that's another powerful weapon that Morgan can have for a playoff run if he can get healthy. And then for Aaron, again, it's going to be a question mark of is it Fields or is it Stroud? Stroud continues to be really good. I think the fantasy points are going to be hit or miss, though. He has been solid, but he's also had these teen weeks. And this week was just another one of them, so he will fluctuate a little bit more. And then anything else? Reed has been okay, but they might need more from him, I guess, if Christian Watson is out. And then you have Kansas City as a D, who is a good D, but I guess they didn't do good this week. All right, and then the final one. This is the most exciting game, down to the wire. Look how close this margin of victory for Jeremy is, and it's a painful one because Ritchie was scratching and clawing to stay in the playoffs, and this was his life, his playoff life, him trying to defend his championship from 2020 to 2023. It just didn't happen. There's a lot though. There's a lot to consider in terms of what caused this. And in some ways, Jeremy, this was a down game for Jeremy, but he still ended up having the the, the high score for the week. So that's kind of like an eye opener. It looks like Jeremy's going to. It looks like Jeremy has the roster to roll to a title easily, but we'll see. It'll make a difference as the season winds down and people try to protect their players for the actual playoffs. But let's review some of the scores and the biggest implications of why Jeremy was able to hang on for this win. Trevor Lawrence was a big key of this. He nearly got 30 points, but I think the big key play in the moment was him getting injured, because during the weekly matchup, it was not the weekly matchup, on the Monday night matchup when it really mattered who was going to win, it was Lawrence and Mixon versus Ingram. So there was a huge gap that Jeremy had that he was trying to protect, but Ritchie definitely had the horses to take over, and he would have taken over had Lawrence not got injured. Because what was happening was he was spreading the ball around. It did hurt when he would throw like a touchdown to, a touchdown to Ingram, or big passes to Ingram, but he didn't fixate on Ingram. There was a lot going to a lot of the other Jags players, and it would have been probably a comfortable win by maybe 10 points if not for that loss. CeeDee Lamb balled out for Ritchie, 116 receiving yards, 12 receptions, and a touchdown. Brown is another painful one to have played because he did nothing that day. I don't know what happened. Montgomery was decent. He was able to vulture a touchdown from Jahmyr Gibbs. That helped the score. Connor, old reliable Connor, got him 2 rushing touchdowns, gave him that 25. Trey McBride, another amazing tight end performance this week. Just happened to be matched by Ingram. Joe Mixon, the other piece of this puzzle, he was a big reason. That 28.6 points is a big reason why he made this a game. And I think the most painful thing to happen was on the goal line when they did a quarterback sneak to Cincinnati's backup quarterback, taking 6 critical points away from Ritchie that would have given that win. Hopkins, the kicker, solid game. And then here's the last piece why Ritchie lost, was the Cleveland D giving him negative points. Had Ritchie not played a defense at all, he wins this game, right? I think he wins this game. Let me just make sure. Oh no, not quite. That gets him a little bit closer. I guess if he doesn't play the Cleveland D, he gets maybe, that's 0.6 that goes to that, and then the score becomes 149.32. Still just barely getting there. But what is a key is our scoring system. It's the points allowed. This 28 to 34 points allowed, it was broken with that 36-point score that the Rams gave, and had that not been the case, this goes to 3 points. This becomes, instead of negative 3 points, I think it maybe goes to 0. So this no longer is a negative 0.6, but it's positive score, and I think that gives Ritchie the win. So that's a painful one when the Rams, I don't even think they needed all those extra points, but I think that's another thing that Ritchie can blame, is the Rams just giving Cleveland the business. And then for Jeremy, why did he win this game? Let me just talk about why it looked like he had no chance. It's because Keenan Allen has been trending down in that black hole of a football game between the Chargers and the Patriots. DeAndre Swift did nothing on the day for Philly. Under drubbing, getting their drubbing by San Francisco. A decent game from his kicker. And then the Miami D being pretty solid. And Raheem Mostert doing a decent game for him. But then he got big scores from Geno Smith in that shootout with Dallas, and Isaiah Pacheco running hard in that loss to Green Bay. And then Tyreek Hill, who, I don't know, he may as well be one of the fantasy MVPs this year. He's at least the MVP for Miami. And Evan Ingram, who is the key to Jeremy's win. Why? Because when when Trevor Lawrence got knocked out of the game, they went to their backup. And as a backup, who is your outlet? Your outlet is the tight end, and he kept feeding Ingram so much that moved Jeremy back in the lead. Because Ritchie did take the lead briefly until that injury by Lawrence, and Ingram was that safety valve, enough to get Jeremy that win. So that's the key for Jeremy's win in this case. What would have helped him secure the win is playing DK Metcalf instead. So that's probably something that's maybe a simple decision to make, because Metcalf continues to play really well as Keenan Allen trends down, so you can probably just swap them out. Hopkins had a solid game, not much from Williams. All right, so that is the painful and bitter loss for Ritchie. So congrats to Ritchie last year for winning the championship, but you will not be able to defend your title this year. All right, so the last thing we can do, drink my water. Let's discuss the standings and then the playoffs. I had to kind of like write my notes out. Let's put the standings up here, and then maybe y'all can see my notes here. So in the playoffs who clinched the playoffs is Mike B, Jeremy, and James. Mike clinches the number 1 seed if he wins this week, I think, against myself. Or if Jeremy loses, then he clinches the number 1 seed. Jeremy already clinched the number 2 seed, so even if he loses, he's still there. But if he can move up to the 1 seed if he wins and Mike loses. And what happens is now they have to have like a point differential, but at this point Jeremy has like a 200 point differential, so that's going to be hard to overcome. So pretty automatic that if he wins and Mike loses, then he moves to number 1 seed. James, with his win, clinches a playoff spot. He clinches the number 3 seed. A loss will move him into an 8-6 tie with Eric win, and whoever is the winner of Morgan or Darren. So it's a possible 2-way or 3-way 8-6 tie for that number 3 or 4 spot. In the playoffs, this is where the bubble happens, right? For 4, 5, 6, and 7. Right now, you have Darren, Morgan, Eric in the playoffs, with Aaron just outside. But then a lot could happen. So for Darren, a win clinches the playoff spot. That moves him to 8-6, and he clinches the playoff spot. A loss moves him to a 7-7 tie. Morgan leapfrogs him. And then if Eric loses, then he's tied with Eric. And if Aaron wins, then it's a possible 2 or 3-way tie with those guys. Does that make sense? It's complicated. Morgan, if he wins, clinches the playoff spot. But the same thing happens to him. He's the alternative, I think, for Darren. So a loss moves him to a 7-7 tie with Eric, or Aaron win. For Eric, if he wins, he also gets he clinches a playoff spot. A loss likely moves him out, though, because he has the lowest point in terms of point differential. Aaron, who is on the outside looking in, if he loses, is eliminated. If he wins, that moves him to a 7-7 tie with Morgan or Darren. If either of them lose, then it's a 7-7 tie with them. And if Eric wins, that's another possible 2 or 3-way tie there. The key, though, is with those 7-7 ties is the points fielded number. I think Aaron is in pretty good shape. He is out of everyone in this group, I think he is second. Darren has the highest, then Morgan, and then Eric is last. So it's a chance for him to leapfrog maybe Eric and Morgan, but Darren might be a little bit tougher one for him to try to overcome. And then the rest of us, Ritchie is on the outside looking in. Gary's loss moves him out. My loss definitely moves me out. And then already out was already Mike L and Brad. So we have one last week for regular season. It'll clarify what these last spots are. The question is, of these 4 guys, Darren, I think Darren is automatically in, but Morgan, Eric, and Aaron, somebody's going to be on the outside looking in. It might be a little bit more definitive than that, but that's as far as I was willing to kind of figure it out. But here we go. So that's it. We look forward to this final regular season game, and then we have the playoffs.